Okay. Well, it says I am live, and it looks like it is also picking up audio from my mic. Perfect. Beautiful. Let's finish getting some things set up real quick, and then we can start the show. All right, let's just scoot that over. Just a touch. Perfect. Perfect. Welcome, everybody, to Just G Live, coming to you live from South Haven, Mississippi, at home with everything going on. It is better that everybody is at home, staying inside, staying safe, staying healthy is the biggest thing there as well. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you guys are staying home and safe just as much as I am. Whew, it is getting late in the school semester, so work has been tough. It's just been piling up, getting to really stress you out just a little bit, especially me. But I always treasure the time that I have here talking to you guys, talking about sports, my favorite thing to do. And right now, especially baseball. It is, as I always say with these shows, sad that baseball is not happening right now. But nonetheless, I do find it a great time sitting down here talking to you guys and really getting into how some of these games and how some of these seasons are going to be coming up or how they're going to be doing in the coming months. Hopefully, fingers crossed, praying that sports come back sooner than later. So, what I have for you guys today is a quick breakdown. I say quick, a breakdown of the NL East, arguably one of the most interesting divisions in all of baseball. It always seems like something is going on here. Between last season, you had the Nationals winning it all, going in as a wild card team and just blitzing just about everybody, to the young and upstart Braves, the Mets, who Mets, as the saying kind of goes, Mets gonna Mets. They always seem to have something going on, and it's not always ooh, excuse me. And it's not always in the most positive way or the most positive light. You've got the Phillies are one of those teams where they have so much talent and so much going on there where they realistically should be better than they are. But and this offseason was no different. They decided, you know what, we're gonna try and load up on some other talent and bring some more players in. And then you have the Marlins. That's all I really got to say about the Marlins right now. They are consistently not very good. And just kind of on that note, we're going to start with the standings from last season. You had the Braves winning the division. They went 97 and 65. You had the Washington Nationals coming in second, picking up a wild card spot at 93 and 69. You had the Mets trailing them by about 13 games. They went 86 and 76. My bad. Why did I say 13? That's 7 games. Duh. Yeah. Wait. I don't know. This is why I don't do math. This is why I talk about sports, and this is why I do writing. This is why. Not going to go any further with that. The Phillies went 500. They went 81 and 81, and the Miami Marlins trailed both the division and most of the rest of baseball, going 57 and 105. Yes, 105 losses. Most teams are, vying to get 100 wins. The Marlins are trying to not have 100 losses year in and year out, is the way that it seems as of late. The Atlanta Braves they're going to be the first team that I talk about, and they've had a very, I'm going to say, busy offseason, but the offseason that they've had isn't necessarily one where all these players are going to be features day in and day out, but they have made a lot of moves and a lot of adjustments that realistically should help them build upon the success that they had last year. So we're going to start with that. We're going to start with some of the moves that they made. The Braves went out into free agency, signed pitcher Cole Hamels from the Cubs, and keep in mind that the list that I'm using is from earlier in the offseason. I think it's from March or something like that. So not everything will be completely up to date. This actually might even be from February, but either way, Cole Hamels signed on a 1-year deal. He was expected to miss the start of the season after he had some discomfort in his throwing shoulder, and that was right before spring training and training camp started. He was set to be reevaluated in March, but they said the earliest he was expected to play is not until mid to late April. And the fact that there's going to be, less time now, either between less time overall in the season, but now less time from starting the season, he should be healthy, and that would be a really good addition for the for the Braves to have him coming in and playing for the team right away instead of the team having to wait for him to get fully healthy. Apart from that, the Braves made a good couple signings. They signed Marcell Ozuna, an outfielder, for 1 year, an $18 million deal. Travis d'Arnaud signed with the Braves from Tampa, coming in 2 years, $16 million. He had a great season last year when it came up when he needed to. When he needed to come up big, he certainly came up big, known for at some point in time even leading off for the Rays. If that doesn't tell you how bad they've been batting. But he's inconsistent, but when he's on, he's really, really on. And having a catcher that can hit the ball well, even if it is just in spurts, is an addition that any team should be looking to make. And the Braves just happen to make one of the bigger ones. Sorry about that. That was just an email from the university talking about coronavirus yet again, everyone's favorite topic. Apart from d'Arnaud and Ozuna and Hamels, well, I should say aside from Hamels is just one pitcher. The Braves also brought in 2 new pitchers and brought back another pitcher. Pitcher Chris Martin signed with the Braves a 2-year, $14 million deal. If I'm not mistaken, he did already play with the Braves before. He is returning, if I'm not mistaken. He's a bullpen guy. He's a solid reliever. He'll get you at least through 2 or 3 innings. But the biggest move that they made, the biggest addition that the Braves have, is relief pitcher Will Smith. Now, Will Smith was arguably the biggest reliever on the market this offseason. So it was just an incredible move that the Braves decided, okay, let's snatch him up before anything else can, or before anybody else can pick him up. He was signed by the Braves to a 3-year, $40 million contract with another team option in 2023. Other than that, other moves that they've made, they brought back another pitcher, Darren O'Day. He would have had some more time to show off to the Braves what he's been able to do or what he is able to do, but he was injured a lot last season, and in his first season with the team, having a lot of injuries and not getting a lot of time on the mound is not necessarily a good tryout, but the Braves obviously saw enough to where they said, okay, we'll bring you back on a 1-year deal, and if you perform well, they will give you another option. There's a player option there worth $3.5 million for 2021. And 2 other position players that the Braves are retaining are outfielder Nick Markakis and catcher Tyler Flowers. They're both on 1-year, $4 million deal, plus a $2 million buyout of a previous option for both. So they're on identical deals. Tyler Flowers will be really good to back up Travis d'Arnaud. And Nick Markakis adds a lot of depth to that outfield that already has a ton of talent. But with all that in mind, I think now it's time to kind of go through this Braves lineup. Looks like leading off will be Ronald Acuna Jr., who, I mean, look, if you watch baseball at all, or if you have at least a little bit in the last couple of years, even if you go say, I only watched the All-Star game, you would know that Acuna Jr. is a star in this league already. He's so young. He's so talented. To have him just in right field at all, perfect. Perfect place for him. You just need the bat. Apart from Acuna Jr., you have Ozzie Albies batting second from second base, Freddie Freeman from first, and Freeman is a weird case to me because he was relative. I don't want to say he necessarily just broke out last season, but last season was the first in, I would say, most of his career that he was a guy that the Braves really, really looked for a level of success, and he was arguably at some points an MVP candidate for the NL. So you have to expect or hope that he comes out and plays to that same level again next year, and I don't see any reason why he wouldn't. Other than that, batting cleanup, they have Marcell Ozuna, who, as a fielder, he's not necessarily the best. If I'm not mistaken, he's actually like a -8, I want to say, runs against when he is playing in the field. But playing in the NL, you got to play in the field to bat. Fair enough. So they're putting him out in left field behind what's going to be either way, no matter who plays third base for this team, a very, very solid third baseman. But Ozuna in left field brings a heavy, heavy bat to that cleanup spot. And either way, he should bring a lot of extra pop to this Braves lineup. Batting fifth, they have Travis d'Arnaud from catcher. Batting sixth, the shortstop Dansby Swanson, who he's another one of those guys where he's just kind of a depth infielder. He's extremely good defensively. When he comes up to the plate, you don't necessarily expect a bomb or even, any sort of extra base hit. You expect him to just put together a nice long at bat. And you expect some sort of either a base hit, strikeout, or, a ground out somewhere in between. But you never expect him to just go up there and not perform at all. You do expect a solid at bat. And I mean, with somebody like Swanson, that's exactly what you're getting. Batting seventh, they have whoever's playing third base, be that Johan Camargo or Austin Riley. Based on his rookie campaign, I don't see why they wouldn't let Austin Riley either play at third base or put him back out in the outfield. He was very, very good for a pretty long stretch of time there in his rookie season last year. The only problem that he had was I'd say he was a little bit streaky at times. He went on stretches where he would play 4 games, bat .330 and hit, 5 bombs. And then the next couple games, he would go 0 for every day. So there is a little bit of inconsistency there. And he ended last season with a forearm injury, which that may hinder his return to the team, his return to the lineup, either in his performance or just playing time at all, because Johan Camargo is an extremely talented third baseman. He's very good both in the field and at the dish. And I would not be surprised if the Braves decide to either put Austin Riley back in the outfield or have some level of competition between himself and Camargo to play third base. And batting 8th and last for the Braves, well, not last, but at batting 8th, last from the field would be Ender Inciarte, who, again, he's just a good veteran, a consummate professional. I don't expect anything great, but I don't expect him to play poorly in that center field role. He'll be solid for them defensively, but at the plate, he does not necessarily bring you all too much. Now, this 5 rotation, this pitching rotation is one that I'm not necessarily convinced by. I like the starting, or I like the ace, and I like one of their other pitchers, and I like their closer, but this is going to be a team that I think is going to have to really, really depend on their bullpen. So just going through their starting 5 rotation, you got Mike Soroka as their ace. Love him. He played very, very well last year. I think he'll be great for them again next year. Mike, again, this is one of those names, guys. I'm sorry if I butcher it. I'm sorry. Fultonowicz, I want to say. Fultonowicz, whichever. He's one of those guys where I think him and most of the rest of the starting rotation is kind of, I don't want to say average. They might be above average, but not by much. I don't think they bring a whole lot extra to the table than you would get from just, going with a bullpen day and having some of your star receiver or relievers, which this team has a lot of new relief pitching coming in and a lot of guys that can eat up innings. So I'd say the same thing is the case with Max Fried. Sean Newcomb, he's the other pitcher for the Braves that I really like. And I think it's a little bit weird that MLB has him as their 4th starter. I see him probably as their 2nd or 3rd. That's just me. I prefer what Newcomb brings to the team and to the ballpark every time he's on the mound over what Fried and Fultonowicz, bring on a weekly basis. And then 5th would be Kyle Wright, and their closer they have is Mark Melancon, who, again, he's a solid closer. And this team bringing in Cole Hamels, I would not be surprised if Cole Hamels either just bolsters this bullpen a little bit more or ends up being one of their starting pitchers. And I think that's what this team is going to end up doing because it looks like Hamels will be healthy. I would not be surprised if Hamels slots into either that 2nd or 3rd starting role, bumping out Kyle Wright into the bullpen and bumping everybody else down a day. And I mean, a healthy Cole Hamels, I think, makes the starting rotation so much better, so much more potent and just a lot better than as it is currently constituted. And then again, this team doesn't necessarily need to have the best starters because they've got a solid bullpen, especially bringing in Chris Martin and Will Smith and Darren O'Day. Darren O'Day, I think, is a good pitcher. The only thing is, last year and in years past, he's been pretty injury prone. He hasn't really been able to stay with the team and stay on the field. I look at this team and just in itself, by bringing in a different catcher, bringing in d'Arnaud, bringing in Ozuna, and bringing in some extra pitching help, I think this team immediately gets better than they were last year. Plus, a lot of the star talent and a lot of the guys on this team, like Acuna, like Albies, like Freeman, even like Camargo and Austin Riley, those are guys that were last year playing either their rookie year or one of their early career seasons, and they're just getting better as they're growing with the MLB game. They are just getting better and better. So, with that much youth and talent in the roster and in the lineup, I would just expect this Braves team to continue their path to greatness and just continue getting better and better. I only see, upwards and away with this team. I have to expect that they get even better and have a better record this coming season than they had last season. Now, here is another interesting team. That is the Washington Nationals. So they didn't make a ton of moves this offseason, but it's one of those things where you have to look at it and say, okay, why would I try and fix something that obviously wasn't broken? Because this team obviously had the talent to, one, make the playoffs, two, get all the way to the World Series, and then three, not just get there, but to win the World Series against a very, very good Astros team. And it wasn't as though they did it just based on their pitching. Each team, had their days of pitching. But this team really won that series based on their bats. Let me just get some quick water. Always good to stay hydrated, as I always say. But with this team, with this Nationals team, they did not do much, especially with the parts of the team that they didn't have to that they didn't have to touch. Pitching staff, almost no changes. Almost none. There are a couple additions to their bullpen and to guys that are returning, but there have not been many changes. There were changes outfield, though. So, the additions made by this team, they brought in first baseman Eric Thames and relief pitcher, Daniel Hudson. Yes, relief pitcher Daniel Hudson. 1 year, $4 million for their new starting first baseman Eric Thames, and 2 years, $11 million for Hudson. They also brought in two other infielders, Starlin Castro and Asdrubal Cabrera. 2 years, $12.5 million for Starlin Castro, and 1 year, $2.5 million for Cabrera. The only other real addition is pitcher Will Harris. Again, he's a guy that's going to slot right into that bullpen and just make it a little bit better, give it a little bit more depth. Now actually, no, you know what? I'll save the really big one for last. So, first baseman / second baseman, kind of just a util infielder, Howie Kendrick, returns to the Nationals on a 1 year, $6.25 million deal with a mutual option for next season, probably at that same rate, if not maybe a little bit less when it comes to the money side of that. And they also brought back catcher Yan Gomes on a 2 year, $10 million deal. Now, here's the big one. The big contract for this team, for the Nationals, is the fact that they decided to, of course, bring back one of their top two starting pitchers, Steven Strasburg, staying with the team for the next 7 years, and at the total of $245 million. First off, I just have to say that is an incredible amount of money. That is so much, it's not even funny. And another thing is that term. Let me just double check how old Steven Strasburg already is. I want to make sure that I don't get this wrong. He is 31. So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind is that he's already 31, going on 32, and this contract keeps him in Washington until his age 38, 39, 40 season. So by the time this contract is over with Strasburg, I expect him to, either retire or just be towards the end of his career, just getting up there in age and having his skills likely diminished by then. But for right now, he is still one of the top pitchers in the game, and I expect him to perform at the highest level for the Nationals. With all that stuff in mind, I think it's time to kind of run through this Nationals lineup. Batting first would be their shortstop Trey Turner, followed up by Adam Eaton from right field. Batting third would be arguably, or just honestly, one of my favorite players right now. He's arguably one of the best young players in the game, and that would be left fielder Juan Soto. Batting cleanup would be either the third base or either of the third basemen. And here's where this team gets a little bit more interesting to me is the fact that it seems as though they don't necessarily have one player set for any specific infield positions apart from shortstop, first, and catcher. Both their second baseman and their third baseman positions are kind of up in the air between a couple different players. So you've got either Carter Kieboom or Kieboom, excuse me, or Asdrubal Cabrera manning third base, and then at batting fifth, they have this team running with either Starlin Castro or Howie Kendrick at second. And then batting sixth would be Eric Thames. Batting seventh would be their catcher Kurt Suzuki, and batting eighth would be their center fielder Victor Robles. And the thing is, with those multiple options that this team has to start, not just play, but start at those infield positions, really gives this team a lot of, having that many options is a good thing. It is never a bad thing to have, too many options, especially on a team where, they're losing, and they lost Anthony Rendon, one of the best offensive players in baseball last season, who decided to take his talents to Los Angeles to play for the Angels. But nonetheless, losing that amount of talent, it takes a lot to replace someone like that. And in the case right now of the Nationals, they didn't just they didn't try and replace that talent with just one player. They said, okay, so we're losing a lot. What can we do to resolve that? Okay, we'll bring in a new first baseman who will certainly play well defensively. His bat is a big bat, but he is a bit of a slugger. He does strike out a lot. Whatever. Okay, that doesn't really resolve the problem. Yeah, we have our first base covered. Okay, but where do we get the rest of that bat talent? Okay, well, Castro's been good the last couple of years. Kendrick was incredible for us last season, especially in the postseason. I mean, he scored the go-ahead runs in the seventh inning, or in Game 7. It might not have been the seventh inning. Either way, in Game 7 of the World Series, okay, we already have Carter Kieboom. He's been good for us. Cabrera's available too. Okay, he's good. He's got a nice bat. You know what? Whatever. Let's bring both of them in. Let's bring in both Castro and Cabrera. And that's kind of what they're doing. Instead of just going with one really, really big player, they're saying, okay, since that one guy is leaving the team already, let's bring in a couple different guys to see if we can use that to replace the production that we were getting out of Rendon. And now to the pitching staff. And I have to say, this starting rotation, this starting five, is arguably one of the best in baseball. I think it has to be up there, certainly. I know last on Wednesday, I think I might have said that I like the Reds as well up there. This is up there with how much I like the Cincinnati Reds starting rotation. Their ace is Max Scherzer, who has been, again, one of the best in the NL. I wouldn't say the best, but definitely one of the best in the NL as of late. Steven Strasburg pitching second, Patrick Corbin pitching third, Anibal Sanchez pitching fourth, and Joe Ross coming in to fill out the rest of that rotation. Sorry, I'm for some reason I'm just getting so many emails right now. It's weird. And of course, closing for the Nationals is Sean Doolittle. This is one of those teams where, coming off of a huge World Series win, and then yes, they're losing a lot of talent in Rendon, but they're bringing back so much talent in guys like Strasburg, Kendrick, Gomes, and then they're bringing in other pitching talent to really help solidify that bullpen. I think this team also gets a little bit better than they were last year. I mean, Yes, Rendon is a huge, huge loss. I mean, just based on the fact that he got, I think it was like 11 years, $350 million or something ridiculous like that. But either way, this is still a team that has a lot of bad talent and really, really good pitching. And that's what I really value over more. I would not be surprised if this Nationals team ends up actually winning the division. I mean, like I said, they've got the bat talent, they can defend, and they can pitch. Don't really know what else you can ask for. But at the same time, it again will likely be a close race. Now to one of those teams. One of those teams. Okay. The New York Mets. The New York Mets. This is one of those teams where I don't really know what all to say about it, other than they're kind of infuriating because this pitching staff should be the best in baseball. Simple as that. I mean, you've got essentially two aces. They picked up an all-star who was the ace for another team until they made a signing, a former number one pitcher, and usually on most teams, what would be a solid number two guy. Okay, but on before last year, they had absolutely no help. And I mean absolutely none. Jeff McNeil played well last year. Jeff McNeil really showed out. Pete Alonso, his rookie season, I mean, he hit 60 home runs. I think it was 60. Either way, he broke the record. He broke the record for rookie home runs. Either way, Pete Alonso, incredible. Michael Conforto, still the jury's out for my opinion. JD Davis, again, jury's out. Robinson Cano, why is he on this team? I'm sorry, he doesn't bring anything to the Mets. He's not good defensively. He can't run the bases. And at this point in his career, it looks like his bat is starting to slow down. That's kind of where I'm at with this team, is that some of the moves made by the front office and by their general manager, Brodie Van Wagenen, who used to be an agent, not even any sort of scout or any type of talent evaluator, is making moves for this team that don't necessarily make a lot of sense. Wilson Ramos is in here as their catcher. He's been okay. And then you've got Nimmo and Rosario, who, again, they're both young players. They're both guys that I could certainly expect to play well in the future. But right now, they've just been kind of thrown into the fire. But with all that in mind, let me just go through the moves that they've made. They haven't made too many moves. They've really tried to fix this pitching staff. So they signed from the Yankees, Dellin Betances, a relief pitcher. He didn't play well last year. He played extremely well the year before. So this is, again, one of those kind of one-year deals, kind of like what the Dodgers did to bring in Blake Treinen. So Dellin Betances in here, 1 year, $10.5 million with a 2021 player option. So that's if Betances wants to stay, he can. Another guy for the bullpen, probably Michael Wacha. Again, he was very good with the Cardinals, and other pitcher Rick Porcello coming in. That's a 1 year, $3 million deal for Wacha, and 1 year, $10 million for Porcello. And outfielder Jake Marisnick. He was traded from the Astros to the Mets. The Astros get 2 minor league prospects for Marisnick. And I kind of already went through the entire lineup, but I think I want to break it down just a little bit further and really kind of focus in on some of these guys that should be very, very good for this team this coming season. So leading off for the Mets, they have Jeff McNeil, their third baseman. He was awesome last year. He was so good at getting on base. He's got a great bat and really good in the field. You've got Pete Alonso, who, look, if you don't know about the Polar Bear yet, just go watch last year's Home Run Derby. He was incredible to watch. It looked like any pitch that he was getting, he was just absolutely crushing. And that's exactly how he was during the regular season as well. I expect him to just get better and better. Michael Conforto out in right field. He's another one of those good guys who just plays solid defense, gets on base a lot. Doesn't necessarily have too much power in his bat, but he is always a good commodity to have, and especially with as young as he is. Same kind of thing with JD Davis. I'm not necessarily as sold on Davis as I am on Conforto. I like Michael Conforto a little bit better than Davis. Davis playing out in left field. I think he'll be good. I think he'll be fine. And then here's where things get a little bit more interesting, or I should say confusing, because to me, some of these moves are confusing. So, Robinson Cano was traded. Let me see if I can actually find this trade, because it was, at the end of the day, it brought Edwin Diaz, the closer, to the Mets, and he has been not great. Not great. He has not lived up to expectations so far with the Mets. And let me see if I can find this trade. Mariners to the Mets. Here we go. So this was the trade for Robinson Cano. The Mariners traded Robinson Cano, Edwin Diaz, and $20 million for the New York Mets for Jay Bruce, Jared Kelenic, Anthony Swarzak, Garrison Bautista, and Jared Dunn. So that's 5 players. Jay Bruce, man, not necessarily worth it. I don't know if he was necessarily the key piece of that. I would like to think that the, 4 top tier prospects, blue chip guys that went to the Mariners for that trade. And I get it. Look, if this was Van Wagenen just saying, look, we need a closer, we need a guy we're willing to take on a contract, which Robinson Cano has a massive one. If I'm willing to take on a contract to bring in someone like Diaz, I'll do it. I will make that trade any day of the week. But the problem with it is he never, communicated with his coaching staff, with his managerial staff on the field and said, look, this is just for this is just for Diaz. This is just for the closer. If you don't want to play Cano, you don't have to. Robinson Cano is starting for this team, and he has been starting for the team all last season. I don't get it. He can't, like I said, he can't defend anymore. He's too slow. He can't run the bases well anymore. He's too slow. And then his bat doesn't make up for it. The power that he brings to the lineup does not make up for those deficiencies that he brings on the other side of the ball. And the fact that he is still starting is what's so mind-boggling to me. Well, we'll have to see what happens with the Mets, because there's another storyline going on behind the scenes, and I'll talk about that a little bit after I finish going through this lineup. Wilson Ramos, batting 6th, is their catcher. He's normally known for having a pretty solid bat, but last season he dealt with injury and just did not necessarily play as well as his normal quality. Then you've got Brandon Nimmo and Ahmed Rosario, Nimmo in center field and Rosario at short. Again, those are 2 young guys that, they're still growing. They still need to get more time on the field. I'm very excited, actually, by what Brandon Nimmo brings. I think he's got a good bat, good head on his shoulders, and he should be on this team for years to come. And this is one thing that will be interesting, is that instead of somebody like JD Davis, Yoenis Cespedes still plays for the Mets technically. They still own his contract, and he very well could play in left field for the Mets next season. If he can return to any sort of form that he had before getting injured, I think 2 summers in a row working on whatever ranch that he has, riding horses and such. If he can return to any sort of form from before those injuries, I think he'd be a great addition to this Mets team. But the Mets really won't have any sort of great gauge on his health until spring training, or until he takes the field with that team. And now comes to the part of the Mets that I enjoy talking about, is their pitching staff, because their starting rotation is awesome. It's so very good. Of course, in my opinion right now, the best pitcher in baseball, he's, I think, might be 2-time running NL Cy Young winner, Jacob deGrom. I mean, this is a guy who, over the last 2 seasons, I think has a combined ERA or an average ERA of sub 2 or sub 2.5. It's just incredible what he's been able to do. Sadly, he does not have the win totals and the win records like he should. That's just because the other half of the Mets team, not very good. And normally I would be talking a lot about Noah Syndergaard, the absolute flamethrower that the Mets usually have. Excuse me, pitching second right behind DeGrom. The only problem is that he will not be pitching this year. This list was made before Noah Syndergaard ended up having to take some time off for Tommy John surgery because a guy who just throws heat the entire time doesn't really surprise me that sooner than later you're going to put too much strain on your elbow, on the ligaments in your arm, and have to get Tommy John. That doesn't surprise me at this point. So luckily, then it was smart of the Mets to go out and acquire Marcus Stroman from the Blue Jays last season towards the trade deadline. He's a good pitcher, very solid. I think he essentially was their number one guy for the last couple of years. And now he'll be either the 2 or the 3 in New York with the Mets. They also brought in Rick Porcello, who, again, he'll definitely slot in as he's a depth guy. He'll be good just to, take some chunk innings at the beginning of games. He'll start. He probably won't finish games for you, but either way, you can't complain. And then last but not least is the only lefty of the group, Steven Matz. Again, he's just like Porcello to me. He's very, depth guy. He will eat up innings. He won't really get, many runs scored on him, but either way, he'll be there for you. And then their closer is Edwin Diaz, who, if he can have any sort of return to the form that he had with Seattle before coming to New York in the Robinson Cano trade, that year he was the best closer in baseball. He was awesome. He had the most saves. Sure, the Mariners weren't necessarily very good, or they didn't do well in the playoffs, or even make the playoffs, but he was exceptional. And if the Mets can, get that type of pitcher back, even with missing Noah Syndergaard this season, I very well could see this team slipping into a wild card spot. This division just has now a lot of talent, and a lot of these teams are just so good at different things. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when I decide to re-rank this division or how I predict the rankings and standings of this division is going to be next season or at the end of next season. It will be interesting to see, though, because there's a lot of talent in this division. And the next team that I need to talk about, which is the Philadelphia Phillies, is no different. This team has so much talent, and they even brought in a little bit more talent to a team that was already very good last season. So they only made 2 major offseason moves. One was really big. They brought in shortstop Didi Gregorius from the Yankees on a 1-year, $14 million deal. Gregorius has been awesome with the Yankees. He was great at the plate, very clutch for them, and then just even better as a fielder. And the Phillies then signed pitcher Zach Wheeler, coming over from the New York Mets, staying in the division, going for 5 years, $118 million. Do I think that's a little bit of an overpayment for someone like Zach Wheeler? Yeah, probably. But to bring in essentially who's going to be your number 2 guy for the next 5 years, and he'll be there, and he's a good pitcher. I guess the Phillies just decided, yeah, who needs the luxury tax? I'll pay that much money for a number 2 guy. And with those being the only major moves that the Phillies have made, I now think it's time to go through their lineup pretty quick. So, batting first, leading off for them would be center fielder Andrew McCutchen, who I'm not sure how much he has left in the tank after coming over from Pittsburgh. He did play well for the Phillies when he did come over last season. I don't know how much he has left in the tank. I don't necessarily know if he'll be the best option to lead off for this team. But either way, it will be interesting to see how he performs. He's followed up by their catcher JT Realmuto, who came from the Marlins last season as well. I think it was last season. But either way, Realmuto he's probably one of the best catchers in baseball. He's got a great bat on him, and he's also very good defensively. Batting third is really this team's superstar, Bryce Harper, who came from the Washington Nationals just a year ago, which you have to think that's kind of sad for someone like Bryce Harper. He's arguably one of the better players in the game. He's got a great bat, awesome in the field. And then he plays for Washington for so long. He says, I'm going to stay in Washington, blah, 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 blah. Goes out and signs with the Phillies, expects to be very good, and they don't even make the playoffs. And then the 1 year that he's not in Washington, they go out and win the World Series. You got to feel for the guy at least a little bit. Batting cleanup for them would be Rhys Hoskins, their first baseman. He's got a big bat. He's just a big dude. Has a lot of power behind that bat, and I would not be surprised if this team really gauges their success or has their success based on how well Hoskins and Harper play. Then you got Gregorius batting fifth, Jean Segura playing third and batting sixth, Scott Kingery playing second, batting seventh, and Adam Hazley playing in center field and batting eighth. All those three guys at the bottom there, they're all kind of on base guys. I don't necessarily know any of them that are known for their power. Certainly not Segura or Hazley. Those are definitely guys that you just expect to get on base more often than not. Excuse me. And even looking at this pitching staff, the starting rotation is very good. This is one of those teams, again, where they have a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. And it was surprising to me that they did not perform last year. Now, looking at this pitching staff, it wasn't as good as it was last year. And you can only hope that one of these pitchers in particular has kind of a return to form from a couple years ago. So their ace is Aaron Nola. He's one of the better pitchers in the NL. I'd say last year, in years past, the NL Cy Young has really gotten down to between, Scherzer, DeGrom, and Nola. Nola's pretty much a strikeout expert. He's very, very good at getting other batters to swing at pitches that they really shouldn't. Backing up for him, or pitching second in this rotation, is Zach Wheeler, who came over from the Mets, as I said earlier. And the third pitcher in this rotation is the guy that I would really, really look for to hopefully have a kind of return to form back from when he was playing for the Chicago Cubs. Jake Arrieta, who was one of the most dominant pitchers in baseball at the time, really has not been good. He has not been great or even nearly as good as he was for the Cubs. Let me see if I can get some Jake Arrieta. If I can pull up some numbers just to see kind of the difference, because there's obviously a stark difference between how he played for Chicago and how he's been playing for the Phillies. So, I mean, as we all know, Arrieta won the World Series there. That's where it is. That's what it is. Gotcha. Injuries, of course. Because what else would it be? Yeah, no, just had to double check that because I was curious at why Arrieta had changed, what had changed. It was injury concerns because, whenever there's a great player, what's the best thing for them? Injuries. And for him specifically, it was a pair of knee injuries. He had a torn ligament in one of his knees and didn't tell the front office in 2018. He then missed some time for that. And then last season, he had to get surgery on, I think it was the same knee actually, to get a meniscus repaired. Again, you just hate to see when injuries kind of derail someone's career, but he seems to be healthy for the start of this season, and we should see a different and hopefully better Jake Arrieta. Apart from those three, you got Zach Eflin. Yeah, Zach Eflin and Vince Velasquez rounds out that 5-man rotation. And then the closer for this team is Hector Neris, who, again, he's a very good closer. I'm a big fan of his. But realistically, this Phillies team should be very good. They have a great mix of talent up front. They've got a lot of power guys, a good mix of on-base guys that are good at base running, guys that are really good at defense. And then you've got a solid pitching staff as well. You just have to think, because Aaron Nola is going to play well. Nola is going to come out and be the guy for this team yet again. You have to think, okay, so we have Nola. We know what he is. He is a known commodity, a known quantity. He will be good. You don't really know what you're getting at a Wheeler or Arrieta or Eflin or Velasquez for that matter. With Eflin and Velasquez, you kind of just hope or expect them to be your average guys. You kind of just want them to be league average. And you expect well above league average at a Wheeler and Arrieta, who, keep in mind, Arrieta's on still a pretty big contract, and Wheeler just got signed to a massive contract. So these are guys that you have really high expectations for, that you have to think, if they even dip a little bit below those expectations, this team's not going to be in a place of success. And now we have to get to The Marlins. I really don't want to talk about the Marlins much because I don't expect them to be very good. I mean, they were, as I showed earlier, as I said earlier, just based on their record, horrible. Absolutely horrible. Just not good. And they've made some moves this offseason. I'll give them that. I think they've made some solid moves. But either way, I don't think that any of them are such a big, life changer that this really changes the fortunes of this team. So they're bringing pitcher Brandon Kintzler and Matt Joyce, outfielder Matt Joyce, I should say. Also bringing in outfielder Corey Dickerson and catcher Francisco Cervelli. They also bring in relief pitcher Yimi Garcia, and they made a trade / kind of claim off waivers. They did both in a very similar time frame. They traded for Jonathan Villar, and they claimed first baseman Jesus Aguilar off of waivers. The Orioles got pitching prospect Easton Lucas for Villar. Those are kind of it. That's really it. So it seems as though they just tried to add a little bit more veteran talent and a little bit more oomph, a little bit more pop to this lineup, to hopefully give it some more life, really. That's kind of what they were trying to do with that. But with that in mind, let's just run through this lineup real quick. They have Jonathan Villar actually batting first, playing third. Behind him at second, or not at second, but batting second from right field is Brian Anderson. Corey Dickerson batting third, and Jesus Aguilar batting cleanup. Jorge Alfaro, who I'm not sure if they're going to start Alfaro or Cervelli. I would assume Alfaro is going to start because Cervelli is kind of towards the end of his career. He's getting up there. I would assume Alfaro starts, bats fifth. Isan Diaz from second base batting sixth. Miguel Rojas playing shortstop and batting seventh. And center fielder Lewis Brinson batting eighth. Like I said, there is a surprising amount of pop to this lineup. I mean, Aguilar's got a big bat. Dickerson's got a big bat. Villar's got a big bat. Those are guys that are home run generators, and those are the kinds of guys that this team needs. I mean, if you look at the Marlins last season, they were absolute worst, MLB worst in some of those offensive categories, including home runs scored and I think RBIs as well. It was just kind of just a poor showing in general from the entire lineup, and it is good to see that they are trying to bring in more talent. Now, as for the pitchers, it's Sandy Alcantara, Caleb Smith, Pablo Lopez, Jordan Yamamoto, and that's a first name. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but Elaser Hernandez rounding out that rotation. And their closer will be Brandon Kintzler, who they brought in on a one-year deal this offseason. That is another big concern for this team, is the fact that they don't necessarily have a really, really good starting rotation. I like Alcantara a lot. Caleb Smith, through the rest of them, are kind of hit or miss for me. They aren't guys that I would say I would really necessarily want in my rotation unless they're all kind of towards the bottom. But I do think that with the amount of changes to that starting lineup, that starting batting order, this Marlins team should be at least a little bit better. But no matter what, I am going to put them at the bottom because I don't think they are nearly as good as any of the other teams in this division. And with all that said, I think it is time to look again at the standings from last year and kind of piece this back together. So this time, I'm not going to go from the top to the bottom. I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. So you've got the Marlins. Marlins, I think, are going to be bad again next year. I'm putting them at the bottom. Marlins at the bottom. Now here's where it gets tough, because the rest of these teams have something that they're good at, that they're really good at. The Mets have a great pitching staff. They look to be awesome with their pitchers. But thing is, I think there's too much inconsistency with the Mets at a couple different things. First off, like I said, I don't like Cano playing. I don't like him having playing time with a young team like this. I don't think he's good enough, and I don't think he really brings enough to either side of the ball that would force my hand to make him play. And thing is, I'm not sure what their new manager is going to do. Now, I was going to mention this earlier, but it kind of slipped my mind. And then as I was talking through other stuff, I thought, wait, I didn't talk about the Mets being the Mets. So the Mets have had two managers since the start of the offseason. The first one was Carlos Beltran, who was a big piece of the whole Astros cheating situation, which I will talk a little bit more in depth about possibly on Monday. I think I'm going to do the AL West on Monday. Um, but I have talked about it extensively on the G and Finn show back in the studio in Oxford. So if you want to go hear a little bit more about that, the older videos are on the channel. Either way, Carlos Beltran was the manager of the Mets, did not even get to coach a single game, and was fired for his involvement in that scandal. And if I'm not mistaken, it was, yes, I was right. Just had to make sure of that. Their new manager is Luis Rojas, who he's just a new manager, a young guy. I'll have to see how he kind of puts this team together and how he fields them. And even though they do have arguably the best pitching staff in the division, I'm gonna have to put them. Let's see. I'm gonna have to put them fourth because there's too much inconsistency. There's too much, I think, hands-on activity. I should say from the front office. The Wilpons just refuse to give this team any money, and kind of for that reason, and the change in manager. And I'm not sure about Rojas just yet. I'm gonna have to put the Mets just above the Marlins. Based on that, I put the Phillies just above the Mets. I think they have similar records. I do think they're both above 500. I think they both have just enough that they're really good at that it makes them better than they were last year. I certainly think the Phillies are better than a 500 team, and I think the Mets are also better than a 500 team, but I'm not sure if they're so much better than their 86 and 76 record from last year. Here's where things get difficult for me to choose because I really love what the Braves have been doing the last couple of years. I love Acuna Jr. I love Albies. I love Freeman. I mean, shoot, I went to high school with Austin Riley. Even the guy who would likely be playing ahead of him, Johan Camargo. This is a very talented, very young team, and it's just tough because while I think their offense is a lot better than the Nationals, I think the Nationals pitching staff is a lot better. And I think it's a hell of a lot better. I like Soroka, but I like Scherzer better. And realistically, Scherzer's better than anybody on their staff. I think Soroka might be better than Strasburg at this point, but just axing the top two guys, I think Strasburg is better than anybody on the Braves. I think Corbin's better than the rest of the staff on the Braves. Same with Anibal Sanchez. And Joe Ross, I'd say, probably fits in pretty well. And then even Sean Doolittle. Now, here's the thing. If the Braves somehow have Cole Hamels come back in, I'd say at this point, Hamels and Strasburg are kind of at the same level, but that still leaves a lot to be desired when it comes to the rest of that starting rotation. And just for the fact that, and this is just me, just because I'm a big proponent of pitching and defense winning and winning championships and winning baseball games, as much as I love the youth movement of the Braves, I think the win actually kind of sparked something in the Nationals, and I think that pitching staff just is going to leave it all out there every time that they play. And none of this is to say that the Nationals don't have any talent. Trey Turner is an incredible shortstop. Juan Soto, like I said, is arguably one of the best young players in all of Major League Baseball. And now bringing in guys like Cabrera and Starlin Castro, that adds a lot of depth to the middle of that batting lineup. Man, this is a hard decision. You know what? I'm locking it in. Hot take. The Washington Nationals win the NL East next season. Go to the playoffs again. Make another splash. Who needs Anthony Rendon? Other than most teams in baseball could use someone like Rendon. But either way, I think the Nationals come in first in the East. The Braves come in second. Likely take a wild card spot out of the rest of the NL. Followed up by then the Phillies, the Mets, and last but certainly least, the Marlins. that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope everybody out there is having a good time with whatever's going on in your life, and you're staying at home and staying safe. I really appreciate you guys coming in, tuning in, and staying for obviously a whole lot of the time. I have been George Ruggiero. Come back right here, same place, same time, Monday afternoon, 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. I will be taking on the AL West. That one should be a very, very fun show. But until then, have a great weekend. Like I said, do what you can inside, read a book, watch some Netflix, shoot, play some Xbox, whatever you want to do. Thank you all for tuning in. But until then, peace.